It is 11 a.m. on October 22nd, 2018. I call to the Lisle Library District Finance Committee meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Long Wayne.
Here.
Jay Fisher, absent. Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Tatiana Weinstein.
Here.
Oh, Jay.
There's Jay.
Okay, great. Just in time. Okay, second item on the agenda, opportunity for visitors to speak. Visitors have 5 minutes to address the board. Anyone wish to address the board this time?
Thank you.
I see none. Let's move to agenda item 3, approved minutes of the June 27th, 2018 Finance Committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the approval of the June 27th, 2018 minutes of the Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
Great, roll call, please.
Jay Fisher.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Long Wayne.
Aye. Great. Let's move to agenda item 4, review draft LLD investment strategy. So we have Ken Herdman from our investment partners to come here and help us facilitate that discussion. Ken?
Well, you asked me to review the strategy that we had put together for you in 2014. And with some discussion and review, I suggested a couple of minor changes, at least in my view. So just kind of questions from you, what you might have about those changes, and anything in particular regarding the strategy.
So what I did was I provided 2014s, I highlighted in yellow, in big chunks, and then what was addressed. And then on the other document for 2018, I highlighted the specifics of what Ken suggested, his suggested changes, and most of them look like you're just updating in terms of finances.
In a couple of them.
The numbers.
I guess a couple of suggestions that or thoughts that I would have. 4 years ago, you had about $5.8 million just in cash, in ready available cash. That has gone up actually 800,000 in the 4 years. You have 800,000 more in cash than you did 4 years ago. And so one of the things I said then, and I will reiterate now, unless you have some kind of project or renovation thoughts or something like that, where you may need some substantial liquid cash reserves in the very near future, I think you have much more liquidity than you need. Looking at your cash forecasts and how you've been using that, I think you probably only need $500,000 to $750,000 in cash on a daily basis. And I mean, when I say that, I mean money in your checking account, money in that you'd have in your checking account, that you'd have in the IMET, that cash that essentially you could snap your fingers, write a check, or move funds. Other than that, I think the district would be, it would benefit them or benefit you as the library district to look at some longer term investments with the rest of that cash. Let me just see a couple other things that I maybe suggested here. there's one note in here about, Ginger or Tatiana being able to, approve any investment, up to, I think the old one says 175,000. And I would suggest making that 250,000. A couple of reasons for that is, you're rarely gonna do anything over $250,000. And that's the way we even kind of look at it, because, one of the big, a very appropriate and efficient investment for you are brokerage certificates of deposit. So those are never gonna be more than $250,000 anyway. And, to kind of keep, even in the long-term, investment strategy in the long-term or intermediate-term portfolio, to keep that liquidity sound and available, rarely are we gonna do more than $250,000 anyway, even if it's not a CD. And then, if it's that, on that rare occasion, it's just going to make, your board and your finance committee a little bit more efficient if we can increase that, amount. But that, I think, is just the kind of the major changes that I made to the strategy and all.
Any questions for Ken?
Well, to go with that section that we're talking about, I guess I'm confused about how the parenthetical you added in there, which is new from your 2014 strategy, it changed, affects, what do you mean? Because right now it says that they should allow the library director and finance director under the 2018, without prior approval from the board or board treasurer, to initiate and approve all investment transactions that are permissible investments as defined by the policy and investment strategy.
Other than.
That's
what I
so
put.
then like the certificates of deposit then. So I guess I'm confused with what the other than. Well, I read the other than to mean that those investments don't
apply to the 250. Right, correct,
Yes. Okay.
right. So if it's anything other than that and above 250, then they would need your approval through the board or the finance committee approval process. And the reason I would say, other than that, first of all, CDs we're never gonna do above 250,000 anyway. So, I mean, we could even take that out of the parenthetical. But, treasuries, US government-sponsored enterprise, and US, I should put US agency securities there. Those are like riskless investments, okay? I mean, there's like zero credit risk in that. So I guess from my view, if Tatiana or Ginger wanted to do a $300,000 US Treasury bill, which is, I say, virtually riskless, it's not very efficient to have to come to you and ask. But yeah, if they want, if I recommend, which I probably never would, recommended a $300,000 corporate note or a piece of a municipal security, again, which I probably never would anyway, but in that instance, at least that leaves it open for you to have the final approval on that.
So shall we strike certificates of deposit?
That's what I would say, because even if I would suggest that, which I rarely would, I would hope somebody would say, why are you offering me a $300,000 CD? Because that would be, I shouldn't be doing that anyway. And then I say I would add US agency security, because there's a difference between a government-sponsored enterprise and an agency, even though the GSEs are oftentimes referred to as agencies, they're really not.
So it adds the word security after US agency?
Correct.
Okay.
The other substantive change that I saw was under safety, where you're extending the maturity of CDs from 3 years to 5 years. Is that just to get better yield on the question?
Well, that's to get a better yield, first of all. Second of all, several states have always limited the term of certificates of deposit, most of them to 5 years, or to 3 years. Recently, Wisconsin being one example, they eliminated that restriction. You know, they took the 3-year off, and hey, if you want to do a CD, do a 30-year CD if you want. They just took that restriction out. However, I do believe in putting something in a policy or in a strategy to limit, because these are fixed term, fixed income investments. I do believe in putting some kind of restriction on any investment, on any term investments, because you are subject to market risk, the value of your portfolio rising and falling with interest rate changes. And if you don't put any limit on maturities and you're buying all kinds of 10, 20, and 30-year securities, you're going to have to market some significant increases and decreases in your investment portfolio in your audit. So by limiting those terms, you kind of limit that market risk. But yeah, increasing that to 5 years would still limit your market risk, but give you an opportunity to pick up some better yields, especially now as rates are rising. And again, it would have to be, for me to recommend something to you, especially a CD with a 5-year maturity, it would have to be pretty darn special.
Anything else, Jay? Liz, any comments or questions?
Not on this part.
So Ken, I just have a couple quick questions.
Okay.
Page 3, we talk about return yield. So from your perspective, what are some good benchmark, kind of say, how well our investment is doing compared, because there's a different standards, right?
Correct.
Because it's,
Correct.
your customer base and the portfolio is quite different. You can't use the private enterprise way of doing the benchmarking.
Correct,
So I
correct.
wonder what's your idea on benchmarking?
Well, when we, you get your portfolio accounting reports, and we do put a benchmark into this, and I believe it's just the 90-day T-bill. Oh, yeah, right, it's just the 90-day T-bill. So we compare your rate of return to the 90-day T-bill. For the library district, I don't think that's a very good benchmark, because you're looking at a benchmark with a 90-day term where the average weighted maturity on your portfolio is 2 years. So one of the things that is going to be happening here is, right now your portfolio accounting reports are done, we do that through Morningstar. We're going to be changing that to Clearwater, to a company called Clearwater. It just gives us a lot more, it's more robust in that we can do more analytics with it than we can do with Morningstar. For the library district, you're not going to notice really anything. Just some color and format changes is about it, but all the information will be the same.
Did you make that move yet? Because you talked about that before.
Last year, yeah, right. Actually, Dawn told me on Friday she plans to convert about half of our clients, that the October statements will be Clearwater. Now, whether you are on that list, I don't know. But then the rest will be the November statements. So the October statements that you get in November might be, if not, the November statements you get in December would be. Longer, I'm sorry, I'm drawing out that question. One of the things that Clearwater allows us to do is to pick a whole bunch of different benchmarks that we can.
Blended in, have a blended kind of a rate.
Right,
for
and we
you.
could,
Okay.
you know, a benchmark for you might be different than a benchmark for somebody else. So what I would suggest to you is we will look at some bond funds, especially some government bond funds with the average weighted maturities about the
Yeah,
same
better
as yours,
apples to apples.
that, right, because then you're comparing apples to apples. You know, it's really not, you know, to show your return compared to a 90-day T-bill, that doesn't make any sense. You're always gonna beat it. And it makes me look good, but, yeah, we wanna compare apples to apples.
And regarding your comments in terms of we may have some excess cash, I think we were kind of talk about private as well is one of the reason, I think we put excess cash into money market, a lot of the money market anyway, right, Ginger?
Right.
Yeah, so in the kind of in the environment of the rising interest rate,
Right.
it seems like it makes sense, especially we don't have a specific need right now in terms of you know, big capital investment today.
Right.
So I understand eventually we will need to make sure that, you know, our capital needs, our cash forecast is lined up with available funds and its maturity. But today, since we're still kind of wrapping up our strategic plan, so we don't have a clear picture yet in terms of cash needs in the future. So right now, that's the reason why we kind of put more excess cash right now today. And also take advantage of short-term interest rate rise as well.
Well, and right now, you know, if you go back 6-7 years, the more you left in cash like that, you were punished pretty severely for doing that. You know, when money market accounts were in 25 basis points and such, and you could do, you know, a 2 or a 3 year investment that might be approaching 1%, hey, you could improve your yield quite a bit. But now with the Illinois funds earned a little bit over 2% for December, and you'd have to go out, well, I mean, even you could do 3 year investments right now that would yield 3%. So you could even pick up 100 basis points over that. So just the point is it's not so bad now to leave a lot in cash because you're being compensated for it. But still, on the other side, when interest rates start to fall, those money market accounts are the ones that are going to be first. Okay, so one way to protect yourself and to have some consistency and predictability in your investment income is to do something longer term and laddered and things like that.
Yeah.
And is there a sense, Ken, of where interest rates are going to go over the next year or two, in terms of your professional opinion?
Well, on one side, you know, you're looking at the Fed is already, interest rates are, on the short end, interest rates are already 100 basis points more than they were, higher than they were a year ago. On the longer end, they barely changed, okay? Even though, say, you know, a three-year term, for example, Treasury bill has gone from like 1.25 or 2.25 to like 3.25, just about. A 10-year is still 3.25, and it was only a little less than 3% a year ago. A 30-year note is about the same now than it was a year ago. So we're going to see, in my opinion, we're going to see interest rates 5 years and less, I think, still go up quite a bit, maybe go up another 0.5% in the next year. But on the long end, I don't see that happening. But there are a lot of people out there that are supposedly significantly smarter than me that says we're going to have a recession here late 2019, early 2020. And if that happens, you know, you're going to see interest rates, especially on the short end, take a nosedive pretty quickly. So take that for what it's worth.
That's great, and I think as we start to executing our, you know, strategic plan, we have a more defined cash flow, cash needs, cash forecast, then we can go back and revisit the investment policy, see what's the right ladder, what's the right duration of investments.
Right. Right. Mhm.
Any other comments or questions for Ken around the table?
All right, well, I'll make those couple of changes on the strategy and send it over to you.
Great, okay, thank you, Ken.
Mhm.
So if we could move to item number 5, review draft policy, 710 fund balances.
Quick question. How did you guys, I mean, this is great. I love the changes. How did you do those? I mean, when did you do those? Was it something that, you did with Ginger and Tatiana, or is it something that came out of another committee, or?
What we did was we let Ken know ahead of time that we were going to be doing this and we needed his assistance. So we sent Ken both policies and he provided some feedback on there. And then as we do with most policies, administration takes a look at it, cleans up some language. And I've already found a couple of things that need help also at this meeting, but we tried to clean up the language and make it more consistent with what's in our policy manual, like the numbering, the formatting, etc. And we met before the
Yes,
meeting.
we met
Good
before
job.
that, and Tatiana did a great job. And one other thing I was mentioning to Tatiana to make sure that our classification on the fund balances is consistent with, she already put GASB, which is like consistent with the audit report. Otherwise, people get confused with different terminologies, and it'll make our audience easier to kind of cross-reference our policy with our audit report.
That was a good point, and that was one of the things that all of us were working on, was to try to make it readable for the public also, and defining terms and, right.
Any comments?
Under one, purpose and scope, the second, I guess it's the second paragraph, now says policy 710 establishes minimum levels at which the projected year-end fund balances should be maintained. I have two questions. One, why did we take out target range? And two, I don't see anywhere in this policy that actually establishes a minimum level of projected year-end fund balances. Did I miss that, or?
Yeah, it's in there.
It's on the 3rd page of this policy, and it's like the very top. It says the
Oh, 12
corporate.
months?
Right, in 6
Yeah.
months.
There it is, okay.
Between
Right.
6
So it's
and
not,
12.
it's specific, it's just based on the operating expenditures. Got that, so question 2 is answered. Is the rationale for taking out target range was?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, that can be left, I don't know. Explain to me where that's then in here.
I know, I'm assuming then that would be where we were back on the top of page 3, where it says the corporate fund should represent no less than 6 months of operating expenditures, and maybe maintain a level representing up to 12 months.
That's the range.
That's sort of the range, yeah.
But it's also a minimum, okay.
I
well,
don't
we
know,
can
maybe,
keep
no, we
it.
can take it out, I was just wondering what the rationale was.
I thought it was kind of redundant, but
Okay.
I guess this was done a while ago, but,
Agreed.
I think it was
Because-
redundant.
Makes sense.
Because, and actually, I mean, if you look at the language, it says it has to be no less than 6 months and may maintain level of representing up to 12 months. So it actually does represent a range.
Okay, you can keep them both?
Uh,
Is that what,
I think it's clearer or more accurate if you put range. I don't know what you guys think.
I don't have a strong opinion.
Okay.
It makes sense. We'll just keep the target range.
okay.
Okay.
The numbering on 3 and 4 will change because,
Can I ask some questions about that? Okay, for A, at the top of that same page, it says non-spendable fund balances. For our audience, should we list which funds are non-spendable?
Ginger and I were talking about this and listing examples. Non-spendable funds are not in a spendable form. So I believe that means like our land, our building, Am I correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, because that's what that was gonna be my question, you know, when you, because you talked about a restricted fund balance and a non-spendable fund balance. And I was gonna ask, what would be the difference? So you have a fund, there's something on your balance sheet for land, for building,
Right.
for furniture and fixtures. Yeah, that would be non-spendable, yeah, you can't.
Well, this is straight from GASB's
Yeah, right,
definitions,
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Do we want an example in there? Does the committee want examples?
I think the examples is okay, it's helpful, but we can't say it's for example, but not limited to, right? I think we
Yeah.
can do that.
Okay.
And then the same point for item B. Again, for the audience, I'm wondering if we should list which funds are restricted fund balances. I like IMRF, special reserve,
So you want
FICA.
examples, okay.
and this is, what about the other fund that's called cash?
Working cash.
Yes. In a way, that's a restricted fund too.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to include that here?
You want examples on all of these?
Yes, I would like that.
Or you can just put C, number 5, where we list the restricted funds now. Other revenue sources legally restricted include IMRF, FICA, O2, working cash, and special reserve. Is that?
I'd like to keep parallel structure, so
Okay.
if we're, you know, listing out the funds in A, I would list out the funds in B. And, you know, C would be the same thing, I would hope. Committed fund balance.
So does the committee want examples for A through E?
Yeah, I was wondering whether some of them would be a little bit redundant, as kind of Jay said, like we've got other revenue funds there, you listed what all the restricted funds examples are.
Well, I was confused because when it says other revenue sources legally restricted for special purposes, the language is a little bit different. And until I got on the board, I would not have equated a restricted fund balance with other revenue sources legally restricted. Because sometimes where you put a word changes the meaning. So I would not have realized that those two are talking about the same thing.
Ginger, on your balance sheet, do you,
That's what I was kind of looking at already.
yeah, I mean, in your balance sheet, you have all the funds, the numbers, everything. So you know which which funds constitute the non-spendable fund balance and which funds constitute the restricted fund balance and the committed fund balance. You know which funds
Right.
make up that definition. I think one thing that might satisfy you, instead of, putting that in here, making footnotes. So you've
So I'm
got
gonna
non-spendable fund balance, you had, you put one, and then at the end of that, non-spendable fund balance, you can list them all. Because here, at least my way of thinking here is, if you put that all in here, you put in every one in here.
You're right.
You're gonna make this really long.
You're right,
okay?
you're right. And you can
And you don't
reference
wanna,
it.
and you
Yeah.
don't wanna make it really long. But you do wanna give, your constituents,
Right.
you wanna be transparent and let them know everything. So if you include every single non-spendable fund balance in there, And every single restricted fund balance, right in this definition, you're gonna make
Hard to
this
read.
you're gonna make this a 12-page, 15-page.
I like the footnote.
Oh, yeah.
Because I use one on the next page, so
It has a footnote.
Great idea.
move along with that.
And then you can even put the number in there, you know, hey, 101, 102, 103, you know, whatever they are, and then they can even come and ask you, oh, I see 104 is this, you know, why is so? It just, you know, would make it easier to read for everyone.
Cool.
Yep.
Good
And then-
suggestion.
Yeah, and then on C, the last sentence says, formal action to commit fund balance must occur before the end of the fiscal year. So, I'm not sure, I know an example of that, but I'm not sure exactly what that sentence means.
Where are you? At the end of C?
Yeah.
Oh, this C, okay. Well, this came straight from GASB, in regards to a committed fund balance, it must happen at the end, before the end of a fiscal year, so you're saying you don't understand? Because anything could be before the end of a fiscal year?
Well, then what happens at the end of the fiscal year if there's no formal action?
Then it doesn't, the funds don't get
Yeah.
committed
Okay.
to that
amount.
to that fund, right? So any action you would take, for example, you would have to say, okay, we're going to commit a formal board action, we have to commit some other fund balance, say, to special reserve. You're gonna remove something from this committed fund balance to something else, and you're gonna have to do that before the end of the fiscal year.
So, if I understand, I guess, committed fund balance, amounts constrained to specific person, government itself. Okay, so I guess this gets back to I'm not understanding what a committed fund balance is. Because I think this is referencing, could be wrong, moving money from corporate into special reserve. But is corporate really a committed fund balance? Because this also says it's referring to a committed fund balance.
I don't think that they're talking about the whole fund when they're saying this, like committed fund balance. It's not like talking about the whole fund is committed. It's like a portion of it. So like, say for instance, if we had somebody that donated some money to us and they're saying that like they're gonna give us $50,000, but we can't use that $50,000. So that $50,000 would be restricted. But they say like maybe the interest on it, you can use that, but you can only use it to buy like children's books or something like that. So that would be committed.
It can be more than one of these
So it's
categories.
not like the whole fund is gonna like, it's not like IMRF is all gonna be like restricted or committed or whatever.
I guess that's what I was a bit confused about, the difference between committed and assigned.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at our audit report, here in fund balances, we don't have, I mean, we have non-spendable, restricted, assigned, and unassigned. I didn't see. This is committed fund balance.
Well, I think like our assigned is more like what we, you know, when we did our budget, that we're gonna, you know, like, we're gonna do a project and it's gonna cost, like, put a new roof on, it's gonna cost $500,000. So we basically intend to use some money out of special reserves for that.
So our internal commitment to the fund use versus
That's what
externally
I,
dictated.
is assigned.
I don't know, I remember the auditor saying something, that the unassigned, I mean, you can have something unassigned, I mean, assigned and restricted. You can have something assigned and committed. It can have more than one.
Oh, yeah, it could.
So it's not mutually exclusive, you know, so there's,
Right.
This is accounting terminology that occurs in our audit every year. So we did, I mean, this has been in our fund balance policy since we began. it's not easy to understand for the layperson. And explaining it isn't, I don't think, gonna be super easy.
And who would we have the expertise and knowledge for us to kind of get a better understanding of the definition?
Our auditor.
Then, as part of when we come back for the audit report is be done sometime in October, November timeframe, right?
December we'll have
December.
the report.
Okay, so maybe we can, unless, Liz, you think this is going to be urgent, we can be, as a part of the follow-up, we talk to auditors when they come back for the audit report. That's one of the questions I'm going to ask is for them to explain a little bit better all the fund definitions laid out in the fund policy.
Well, I think all of these terms are used in our audit, would you say? So we can provide examples in the footnotes of what certain of these definitions are for us, and some of them are going to be repeated, like an assigned fund balance would be, could also be a restricted fund balance when we list these things out, like special reserve falls into a couple categories here.
I would appreciate that very much.
Sorry, Liz, I had two questions about this section before. I can
Go
ask
ahead.
them before you move on to your next
Sure.
section. The sentence says, it starts, the following fund balance classifications as established GASB. Do we need by
Yeah.
there? And then it says, depict the relative strength of spending constraints. I was confused about what the relative strength of adds to this sentence. What makes sense to me, as established by GASB, depict the spending constraints placed on the purposes. What does relative
Yeah.
strength add to that makes it clearer?
Yeah, we could take that out.
I don't know.
But then the way it sounds like is the most restricted is non-spendable, the least restricted clearly is.
Okay.
It's true.
So
I
that's,
mean,
so
but
it
also,
adds the level
You
of.
can use a different
from max-
Spendability.
Okay.
We can
restriction.
prioritize it or just use relative strength if you like, if you don't mind that term, but in GASB, they do prioritize it.
So what,
So is relative strength
there a-
okay, or would you like another term?
How about in parentheses, the definition of relative strength? How are we using it here? From more restricted to less restricted?
do we want to, we can say, depict the spending constraints placed on the purposes for which resources can be used. From most restrictive to least restrictive?
Yeah, listed
That's
in.
more words to say, I don't know.
Okay.
Pass the baton back to you, Liz.
I was just wondering, our audit report is due in December, which seems late to me.
It is, we stated that we were late in their schedule.
Well, I know we're talking about going out for new auditors, and I guess my recommendation would be to get the audit earlier, and maybe that's a requirement we put in the RFP. Because, part of choosing somebody is saying, hey, we need this before we vote on the levy in November, which to me would be very helpful, so maybe we make that a condition.
Well, we can talk about that when we do that.
Yes, we'll do the RFP, yes.
Okay.
You're probably gonna pay for that, that's.
Well, everything is
No,
cost-benefit
No, I know,
analysis.
I just, if your fiscal year, are you on April or June?
June.
Okay, so if you tell them, you want, part of your RFP says, you have to have the audit done by
September.
October 31st or September or something like that, don't say fine, but.
If it costs $1, we'll do it.
It'll be more than that.
Have them price it both ways, that's a good
Yeah,
suggestion.
Yeah, yeah.
good idea.
What I would consider, I'm sorry, can we move on to number 4, is that okay?
Sure.
What I would consider adding here is when we say, but not limited to personnel, does personnel equal salary and benefits?
Mhm.
Okay, since that was a little unclear to me, would we consider replacing personnel with just the words salaries and benefits?
It's up to you guys.
That's okay.
That's fine.
Well, I think you have it like this because of the fact that's our categories in our
In
budget.
the audit report?
Well, in our budget.
In our
Yeah.
budget? Oh, okay.
So.
It's under personnel, or is it under, is
Well,
that the
yeah.
title? Yeah.
Or we can add a parenthesis like we did in the materials.
Yes,
Salaries
Okay,
and
we can do
benefits.
parentheses, there we go.
that'd be cool. And I guess at the top of the next page, if we're ready to go on to that, are there, I know that at the year end, these extra balances in the corporate fund may be transferred to the special reserve fund by a board resolution. I believe there are other options that we have. We could do a tax abatement. We could lower the subsequent year tax levy. I think we need to list, and maybe there are more options, I think we need to list more than the single option.
I think we have to investigate what is legally an option, but we can put in a sentence that there may be other options, or something to that effect.
Yeah, and I'd like to, if we're going to mention what one option is, which is transferring it to the reserve, I think we need to find out what are the other options, because as a trustee, I don't even know that. So I'm sure that our target audience doesn't know it either.
Well, I will look into that, and then I will, for the next draft, prepare what other options there are.
Great, thank you.
That might be your only option,
Okay.
because we're talking about funds that you have, okay? You know, so you have, essentially, you
difference.
have excess funds in your corporate fund. And I think your only option, if you wanted to move that, is to the special reserve. But what you're talking about, a tax abatement or something like that, that's on the next level, what's coming up. So if you have, excess funds in your corporate fund, say your corporate fund now is 15 months of your operating expenses, you can say, okay, we have more than we need, so we're just not gonna levy as much. Okay, but that's something in the future. Okay? What this is talking about is here, so we have this now. We can leave it here, or we can put it over here. But that's, you're talking about a point in time. And
So-
that's something that's gonna happen in the future, so.
We couldn't say, or may be used for a tax abatement, or to lower the tax, or may stay in the corporate fund and be used.
I'm just throwing out my
Oh, no,
opinions
no,
here,
no.
Yeah, I'll
okay?
look into it.
I appreciate you.
I think that is, what you're talking about, adding that there, and if I was reading this, that would just be more confusing.
Muddy the water.
Well, and also
Yeah.
the word may is in there, may be transferred, which in turn means you keep it in.
You don't
corporate.
have to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'll look into the legalities behind that particular fund and moving anything.
And maybe we just need to have a discussion at the whole board so that we understand, what the pros and cons of moving money to the special reserve are. Because I know last year we just voted it, yes or no. We didn't really have a discussion.
I think there was some, but sure.
So maybe it's a discussion, and to your point, maybe it's not listed.
Yeah, I think this maybe just have, as you said, basically you want two choices, either transfer or not transfer.
Yes,
Because
that's
it's existing
probably
money
it,
already
yeah,
got.
yeah.
So when you have a budget time, we can kind of talk about third option?
Well, it says the corporate fund should represent no less than 6 months or maybe obtain a level of representing up to 12 months. So if you have, let's say, as Ken said, you have 15 months, I guess under the policy, you do have two choices.
Mhm.
You can,
Leave it there.
Or
well,
transfer.
that's actually
transfer it.
3. Yeah, well, there's Yeah, you can leave it there but then you'd be over the amount, and then maybe you use that to lower the levy. In the preceding year, you could transfer it to special reserves. Or I guess you could completely ignore the policy and just leave it there at all and not do anything. But yes, sorry.
Yeah, technically, yeah, as you said, for future forecast, the third option is for the next year's levy, you could consider the excess amount.
Yeah.
But that's, yeah.
And then on number 5, I know I'm bringing a lot of stuff up, so.
I was bringing something up on number 5, so maybe it's the
No,
same
no,
thing.
no, you go first. I've been talking a lot.
The sentence that begins each fund, says each fund is documented via line item in the district's annual property tax level with the exception of the working cash fund. And it says in parentheticals, the LOD does not appropriate for working cash funds. Was that supposed to say levy, or do we not actually appropriate into the working cash fund?
We don't appropriate.
So we have a working cash fund. We don't levy for it. We don't appropriate for it.
Right.
What do we?
Go ahead.
So the working cash fund was used when we had to create it when LLD, first came about. So they had it for, I don't know how many years.
You can only do 4.
4 years, okay. That they actually levied money at that time. And then they must have stopped. But, so we have like $412,000 in there now.
And
Which-
we don't appropriate for it, and maybe we should say, I don't know, I put that in there to make it clear that we don't appropriate to spend it but if we needed to use it, we would have to go through like a resolution or an ordinance, a legal procedure.
Yeah, and I don't really
So
know
we
what
have
that entails.
$412,000 in the working cash fund that sits there year after year
Gaining interest.
It gains interest. Yeah.
until.
Here's an option. So it's supposed to be used for outside of capital projects if we needed it, okay? We can dissolve it. It is a process to do that. It has to be done, I believe, at the end of your fiscal year. We can talk about that during our budget time for the next year. But this has been something on my mind for a couple of years, and as soon as I started really delving into the levy and the budget process back in 2017. So this is something we can do, and
So it's subject for a different meeting.
It is, but I mean, this is something we should explore.
The policy language as stated is correct.
Yes.
But we don't need to get into what we need to do about the working cash fund as we review the policy.
Right, I mean, it's true, we don't appropriate for it, and it's true, we don't levy for it.
Okay. All right.
And maybe not this audit, but next, time we talk with the auditor and stuff, we need to take a look at all the funds and simplify, because I think we closed some of those last year to just simplify our financial statement. And this is one of them where if there's no specific purpose for this, probably, I agree with Jay, we said it's gonna be a bigger discussion with the rest of the board, but we probably need to do something with it since there's no specific reason for having that need exist right now today. Good point.
Is there a difference between, I guess my question is, do we need to add "and the special reserve fund" to that same sentence? Each fund is documented, is it the exception of the working fund and the special reserve fund? Because the special reserve fund, we don't take a levy into it. So does it need to appear in that sentence, I guess?
It's not in that sentence.
No.
Or you're wanting to see if you,
With the
That's it.
exception?
That one, right? The sentence that begins other revenue sources?
no.
No, each
Oh.
fund is documented in the annual property tax levy, with the exception of the working cash fund.
It's the same
And that's
line.
true, but the special reserve fund is documenting our tax levy because we do appropriate for it.
Okay, so as a taxpayer, I see a line item saying special reserve, even though we don't, as a
Levy.
library, we don't levy into it. Okay, I didn't realize I saw a line item on my taxes. And would it just say 0%?
Not on your taxes, on the levy, on
On our
our
budget.
document. we do show the special reserve line. We appropriate for it, but we don't levy for it. We appropriate spending out of special reserve every year. Whether we do or not is a different story, but we don't levy for it. But it shows up on our document.
Each fund is documented via line item on the district's annual property tax levy. Okay. So it's, just so I understand it, but not on
Your bill.
taxpayers' bill. With the exception of the working cash fund. Okay. There's so many people who are so confused, and they asked me to explain it, and I just want to make sure that I'm telling them the truth. Anybody have anything in number 7? Okay, first paragraph, last line. What I'm wondering, I know it says an annual cash flow analysis or review of cash flow forecast. I would like to see language that we're going to have an annual, but also update it monthly with cash flows and outflows. And I guess in addition to that, it's almost like we need a 5-year financial plan, which includes, like, let's say we restripe every 2 years and we repave every 2 years. I would think that on our 5-year financial plan, we would show that cost in the plan and anticipate it every 2 years. And by doing that, it tells us a little bit more about how to invest our funds. Plus it tells us what expenses are coming up. Because obviously if we know we have to remain more liquid because we pave and stripe every 2 years, then I would want to see that projected in a 5-year financial plan and then, cash flow analysis done.
Well, Ken does provide us a monthly cash flow, but it's done after we already pass out the board packet. Because he needs a certain part that we provide to him that's from there that I provide to him, and then he sends me something. But it's already after the fact, after the board packet goes out.
So that's reporting expenses made. I'm saying projecting. I'm not saying report what's already happened. Am I confusing it, or?
Well, I thought you said like you wanted a monthly forecast, cash forecast. And I said that he does provide us one, or he provides it to me, but after I send him part of our board packet.
So she just gave me the information for September. So now you have a forecast now that shows what actually happened in July, August, and September, but then a forecast for October through June.
Oh, seriously? We have that today?
Well, yeah.
Am I just not seeing it somewhere?
No, you don't have it. He sends it to me, but I didn't send it out in the packet because it was already too late.
Can you send it out in next month's packet?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, I didn't think we even did this.
Well, I think.
I mean, it's gonna be a month late though,
Well,
Well, it'll be, right, and when you get the October.
It's only gonna be up to September.
It'll only be up to September, but October through June will be a forecast.
see,
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Am I the only one? or-
No, I agree in concept that it's nice to have a cash flow forecast, but it's only valuable if you spend according to, the accuracy of projection. Today, the most we can project is our operating expenses. And occasionally, if we have, expenditures like for elevator stuff, we know it's coming. But in order to make it more valuable, you have to lay that out, as you mentioned, the 5-year has to be laid out with our strategic plan, like what are they, 500,000 gonna spend, where's millions gonna spend. That become really what cash flow become more valuable. And also today, another part of cash flow is to help with the investment ladder and help us manage our finances tightly. Today, we have a lot of liquidity today in our account. So really having a cash flow forecast doesn't do a lot of value for it. That's why I knew that Ken is doing something, but I didn't. I looked at it a couple of times. I just felt like that doesn't inform us to make a decision until we actually know what are the major milestone spending will be, which today we don't really know. Except only thing we know is monthly operating expenses.
Well, let me give you an example. With Green Trails Investment, or not investment, Improvement Association, we know that we will repave 1/3 of our trails every year. So we know how that's gonna be billed over how many months. So are there things that we know that we have to improve the roof every 3rd year? We have to, I'm just trying to get a handle on that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think we're in a very unique time here because of our strategic planning conversations. The whole conversation of just the facility has extended from 2012 till today. So we're really at a crux in terms of kind of decision making. Where we go from here, I think we will know in the next few months, and then, as Longry mentioned, planning out a 5-year makes sense. Right now, the restriping of the parking lot, we budget for that, and that's budget conversation and budget discussions when we talk about those smaller type of expenditures.
If we did have a 5-year financial plan, though, I would think those things that you already budget for would become part of the 5-year plan. I'm assuming it's not only large capital expenses that would be in there. Am I correct?
You can cash for forecast to whatever line item level detail you really want. So the ongoing operating expenses, we know on the monthly how much average we spend. You are developing a 2018, 2019 capital project list. We can dollar that out and try to time out the best we can. But every month, it changes in terms of timing. So those are pretty easy, but the biggest chunk is kind of what we just talked about, what we want to do with bigger capital expense in terms of this building and technology plan. Those are going to cost a lot more money. So those are things that we can time it and budget for it. So today we still, that will be where the value of a cash flow comes in. And also cash flow doesn't really help us on the month-to-month. It's more on the basically a minimum a quarter or a year. Those are annual or quarterly basis will make it more valuable.
So I guess it probably doesn't belong in this document, but it sounds like what you're saying is one of our goals after strategic planning is to have a 5-year financial plan.
That's kind of my expectation for this.
Cool.
But the level of detail is open to discussion and
The
what,
execution implementation will be a different.
what works.
Cool.
Any other discussions around policy 710? If not, let's move to item number 6, review draft policy 720 investments. Comments, Jake?
On item 2, standards of care, is this language taken directly from the US code?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's what I figured.
Well, the language that was before it, I think was kind of a mash of it, so I
Okay.
just provided what is there. We can strike it, we can modify it, or we can keep the old language, it was just an option.
New language directly from the code is good.
Item 4, safekeeping and custody. B, subsection 4. Why did we strike out the limitations on what the mutual funds can be invested in? Does that not allow us some danger of investing accidentally in mutual, or on purpose, and investing mutual funds that are invested in things that we can't be invested in?
I'm gonna ask Ken to comment on this one.
Remind, what is stricken again?
It says, provided that the portfolio of any such money market mutual fund is limited to obligations described in paragraph 1 of this section and to agreements to repurchase such obligation.
In 4,
Yeah.
Roman 4. And I could have been mistaken, I was taking Ken's notes to ginger and red, and maybe I read something incorrectly, but I struck that.
And what is paragraph 1?
Did I read it wrong?
Well,
There's no paragraph 1, it's A, B, and I.
Well, really, what the statute says is money market mutual funds registered under the Investment Company Act of 1940. That's one.
Okay.
Okay, first, if you're gonna do a money market mutual fund, it has to be registered under this act. 2, there's only certain things that fund can invest in.
I'll go see what that's about.
And that is limited to obligations described in paragraph 1. So in paragraph 1, you're talking about bonds, notes, or that should be paragraph I, actually.
Paragraph I, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Those things are what this fund can invest in. So probably, Jay, I think what you need to do there is to unstrike that.
Okay.
You know, in 4, and described in paragraph I, you know, small I.
Okay.
Instead of paragraph 1.
Gotcha. Okay.
I had one, actually 2 other questions.
Are
What-
they on the same page?
No, but if you want to, so please,
Okay.
before we get too far ahead, do you want to?
Yeah, the first bullet point on the top of that page, I was wondering if we need to define periodically. Because what if periodically is 5 years? I don't think that would be acceptable. You know, what time frame are we committing ourselves to review the portfolio? Is it 1 month? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years?
Quarterly, or, I mean, what's the difference is like, we talking about portfolio, like performance, I mean, today, in practice, we do it on a quarterly basis, pretty much. Is that what you're gonna?
Yeah, would you mind switching, you know, periodically to quarterly?
That's okay.
Your
I
turn.
have a couple of pages ahead, if there's something that we might want to go through it in order.
Okay, on the next page, under D, paragraph 2, it says accordingly, the investment officer. Is that the treasurer of the
Yes.
board?
Yeah.
Would you mind putting treasurer of the board, or?
Sure.
A thought, is investment officer defined somewhere in here? Okay. Number 1, that's what you want, that's the first thing you want to do is, who's the investment officer, all right? We'll establish, okay. And in my mind, the treasurer is an elected official, is an elected board member,
Right.
correct? So you're saying here that if you're gonna say the investment officer is the treasurer, that they shall establish a process for an annual independent review. Okay, yeah. No, I was looking at something else. All right. So, never mind that.
But we can just switch it to
but-
treasurer.
First you should define who is the investment officer, if that's the treasurer.
I'm wondering if we strike investment officer and just put it.
If that's the only place you
Yeah.
use it.
Yes, it
That's the
is.
only
That's
place
the
we
only
use it.
place you use it.
Yeah.
right, then-
It is.
then you-
Under C,
right.
we have, which is on page 2, there is a delegation of authority, so you might want to put it there.
But we're not using investment officer, because that's the only time we use it.
I know, but, yeah, well, you could put it in there.
I'm sorry, where are you, Beth?
Back a couple pages
Page 2,
on
there's C in the middle of the page, it says delegation of authority.
Okay.
But if that's the only time we use it,
Why bother?
Investment fund, treasurer of the board. Okay, the management administrative duties, all right, okay.
So I have a quick question. So Ginger, so in our audit, scope, our scope document, service scope document with the auditors, did we include a review of investment policy?
They do review it, yeah.
Yeah, because they're going to make they have to review it basically, because they're making a comment in your audit that talks about market risk and credit risk and all that kind of stuff. And then they make a statement there that says, you have a policy addressing these risks. And if they're not reviewing your investment policy, they can't make that statement.
Got it.
And then one more thing on that page D, internal controls. I tried to look up and understand what the avoidance of physical delivery securities. Is that like,
If you go to your local bank and you do a CD there, a document is created. If they give you that document, they physically delivered that to you. Now, you're responsible to safekeep it, okay? So what you're trying to do here in your investment program is to never take physical delivery of any of those kind of things, that the custodian,
almost like
does
bearer
that.
bonds?
correct,
Okay,
right.
okay.
moving on to the next page. I was wondering why letter F was struck. Do we not need something to
think it's-
require that our people be appropriately bonded?
I think it's already addressed.
Yeah, in that delegation of authority.
Was it
Yes.
delegation of
Page
authority back on
2.
2C?
Yeah.
There you go, that's why. Perfect, thank you.
You're so easy to get along with.
Yeah.
One more question. Under, I think we're on the next page, if that's okay. Under 6A, reporting methodology. What do you think about including an investment report, including ROI net of fees? Shall be prepared, at least monthly.
You could do that.
You do that today, right?
Yeah.
Net of fees.
Actually, when I talk about Morningstar, this is kind of like what it's gonna look like. okay? And right here, it does give you your yield net of fees.
Cool. Great.
And your, actually, your, I believe the reports you get now, there's a performance report that is available, and this is net of fees.
Oh, so this is the one.
Or wait,
above.
maybe, oh, no, this is gross of fees.
Yeah.
Because you pay us by a check. Okay, we don't take it out of your account, so therefore Morningstar can't calculate the fees, your return net of fees.
But when we
Okay?
get the new one in?
I think so, I'll have to check,
Okay, because that's important, at least. I think it is.
I had a couple of formatting things I just wanted to make mention. If we can just go back, just so you know when I change it. To the beginning of the policy, not the first page, the second page, there's a duplicate, that's why there's a strikeout in B. That's just a duplicate paragraph.
Which policy are you in?
I'm in 720, the one we were in, but on the
Okay.
second page under B, it's a duplicate paragraph that was struck out. Then in C, Longry and I talked about adding something to this particular paragraph, that the treasurer will be apprised of transactions that, remember?
They were like in accordance with the investment strategy.
Strategy, correct. So we're gonna add a sentence there that, under that delegation of authority. And then under number 3, 4, under liquidity, the sentence doesn't end in any kind of, so do we want like I just wanted to know what you thought. Do we want a colon? Do we want a dash? Because it lists these kind of characteristics of number 4. Do you want a colon there? Do you want a dash? Do you want a comma?
Well, you have a list after it, so would
That
a
was
colon,
there.
a colon
Okay,
be
we'll put a colon
appropriate?
there. All right. Then on the next page, under number 4, I'm just going to change,
There.
yeah,
Colon.
I can just put dashes there then, instead, just to make it formatted. Okay, number 4, in the second paragraph, I'm going to change all the Lisle Library districts to LLDs, because that's what we've done throughout the document. We didn't catch those the first time around. And then on the next page, under C, collateralization, the 1 and the 2 will be the Roman numbers 1 and 2, because that's what we're doing with the rest. And that's all I got, just for formatting.
Any other discussions around the table?
What's the next step?
Next step is to provide a new draft, and then have the board, if this committee wants to forward it to the board for approval.
Do we have to have a motion to forward it to the board? Or,
I think we can just make a recommendation to forward the updated drafts to the board.
Because we approve in the committee, right? And then
You-
we
Make a recommendation.
make a recommendation for
Yes.
approval, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll update the drafts, and then at the board meeting, you'll approve the revised drafts.
I would like to see us recommend it to the board. I don't know how you two feel.
No, yeah,
Yes.
we will have to, I
They
think.
can, yes.
To get voted on, so. Okay, so if there's no more discussion, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second?
I'm just gonna pass this out to you, this is our annual portfolio
All in
review
favor?
for you.
Aye. Thank you. All right, the meeting is